Today it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Floyd Stone. He's a native of North Dakota here. Lived in various parts of North Dakota. He's living in Langdon now. He was a prisoner of war in the Korean War, sometimes called the Korean conflict. I should maybe add that most of the prisoners of war that we have are here because of luck. As Mr. Stone is, but besides being lucky, Floyd here is a genuine hero of the war. And he won the Silver Star in the Korean conflict, and we'll come to that later on to mention, but that's a very rare medal, and it gives me pleasure now to introduce you, Floyd, and you can tell us where you were born and just kind of follow us through your life as you go to different places. And if I think of something, well, I'll ask you about it and so on, but you just go ahead and talk and tell us about yourself.
Okay, Elmer, first I want to thank you very much for having me here. And now I'm living in Grand Forks.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
Well, I was born in a little log cabin up in the Vang community of Vang, North Dakota, on the February 12th, 1929.
Mentioned that Vang is up by the Canadian border.
Yeah, it's
north of Walhalla.
West of Walhalla.
Yeah.
It's about 5 miles from the Canadian border. It was a Norwegian community. And I was born in this log cabin, like I was saying, on my great uncle's homestead. So I always tell my wife, Abe Lincoln had nothing over on me, because I was born in a log cabin too, and so was Abe Lincoln, of course. But she always looked at me and she said, "You didn't become president." Well, I was born and raised there. Then my dad was in the farming business. So when I got old enough, I worked for different farmers, different areas. In 1948, then I started with the Farmers Elevator Company in Walhalla as an employee of that elevator. I worked for the late Charlie Fox. So in about that time, of course, then this Korean conflict was brewing. And in 1950, in the fall, I was drafted. But Charlie, my boss, got me deferred until March of 1951, which I reported for duty at Fargo on March 26th, 1951. And then I took a troop train from there to Washington. I think of the name of this, Fort Lewis, Washington, and I was supposed to I stayed there for about 2 weeks. All my other buddies that I went with were shipped out, but I was supposed to be taking engineer training. So they told me. Well, all of a sudden it come down the tube that they shipped the whole camp to Camp Roberts, California on troop train. And there I took my 14 weeks of basic at Camp Roberts. And after that basic was over with, and then we were sent home for a 10-day furlough and then reported back to Camp Stoneman, California. And from there, I was loaded on a ship and was shipped to Yokohama, Japan.
What kind of ship was that? Just a transport?
It was a troop transport,
troop
yeah.
transport.
Yeah.
Well, those were Army troop transports, weren't they? Or,
Yeah.
They were designated to carry troops, weren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were. I think we had 5,000 people, 5,000 troops on the, or something like that. And from there, then of course we spent about, I would say, 10 days, probably in Yokohama. I can't remember exactly. And they were loaded back up on the ship and moved out to Incheon, Korea.
How far is that from Japan to Korea, that distance? Is there?
It took about 3 days
It's over water, yeah.
over water,
Yeah.
3 to 4 days.
Yeah.
Well, then we landed there on barges, of course, or landing craft, or as you call them, at Incheon. And from there, then I was transferred to the Fox Company of the 8th Regiment of the 1st Cav Division. And I was sent up to the front lines. And that was about, roughly, I can't the exact dates, but about the first part of September.
Was that an Army unit then you were with?
Yeah, I was just in the 1st Cav Division Army unit.
Yeah. They were all soldiers carrying rifles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any mechanized vehicles with you that you rode in, or did you have to march?
Well, yeah, we had trucks, and
Yeah.
a lot of times we would, if we were on patrol, we would patrol with tanks and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then we shipped up to the front, which was about first part of September. Well, I was only up at the front about a week or a week and a half, and then our unit got shipped to the rear again for rest, R&R, see. So I was moved back then, of course, with the unit, and then we moved back up on, I think it was about the middle of October.
This R&R now, that's rest and
Recuperation, yeah.
What did you do? They just stayed in camp or something?
We just stayed in the camp there in the area. Of course, there was some of the guys that had enough time, and they took them to Incheon and took them to Japan or whatever. You know. Then about the middle of October, then 51 there, they decided they were going to make this big push and straighten out the ML, which is the MLR. It's the main line of resistance. So we did this and got up to where I know it as Hill 334. And that's where I was at the time of, they had this MLR, main line of resistance. Then they had an outpost, which was about 1,500 yards beyond the main line of resistance.
American outpost.
American outpost that we would.
How far were the Koreans from you then?
About, I would say about a mile, probably 3/4 of a mile. And they were. So then they would, each company then would take turns manning this outpost. Like we'd go up this morning and we'd stay all day and stay all night and then come back the next day.
How many were there then at that outpost?
There was a platoon-sized, which like in my case, it was 48 men.
Then you formed a sort of a lookout and a perimeter around that
Right.
outpost.
Yeah, there was dugout trenches in the perimeter, and we'd set up our automatic weapons in certain corners. Which, like I was what we call the barman. I carried a Browning automatic.
Browning automatic rifle. Yeah.
Rifle. So then I also had 2 ammo bearers with me that carried ammunition for my bars.
Was that all they carried? Did they have rifle too?
No, they also had carbines with them.
Oh, they had carbines.
Yeah.
But their main duty was also to carry ammunition.
Also to carry ammunition for.
Yeah. That Browning automatic, did that have a clip or did you,
It had a 30-round clip.
30 round clip?
It was a square, about this
Yeah,
long.
I see.
And of course, with one pull of the trigger and then 30 rounds would be gone if you weren't, you'd burn up your rifle.
Did you have machine guns with you too?
Yeah, we had machine guns.
30 or 50 caliber or?
Both.
Both.
Both, yeah.
You had ammunition carriers for those,
They had ammunition carriers for those guys too. Yeah.
and they were set up on their outposts there too.
Right, yes.
Facing the Koreans.
Facing the hill, the outpost was a kind of a round outpost.
On top of the hill?
On top of a hill, and we were facing all directions.
Oh, I see.
So when we got hit that night, it was
Hit, you mean the North Koreans come?
by the Chinese. Yeah, it was
Was it Chinese or North Koreans?
Chinese that hit us, or
Oh, Chinese. Chinese Army.
Army. Yeah, it was 2,200 hours, or which is in civilian time is 10 o'clock at night. And that flash will always be in my mind as long as I live, because I had just gone off guard duty, or just coming on guard duty, I should say. And as I was standing in the trench, and I was facing northwest, and I seen that flash. And this was, and about 2 seconds later, it hit right in the platoon CP of our outpost.
Of your outpost.
Yeah. And that's when the battle started.
What size shell was that?
It'd be an artillery shell of
Yeah.
some kind, I
50,
don't,
yeah, okay.
70s,
75 or so.
something like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Did it kill quite a few or?
Well, it got the platoon sergeant right away and the platoon runner.
They were killed.
Yeah, they were killed right away. It hit right in their CP. And then the battle was on. Of course, we fought for, that was 10 o'clock, and it was
At night?
At night. And we held the hill until about 3 o'clock the next morning.
Now, were they coming at you, the Chinese,
Yeah,
with rifles
the rifle.
and firing?
They were coming through their own artillery and through ours, because when the battle started, our people behind us on the main MLR were artillerying all the way around this outpost. They had this all synchronized, so they
Protecting you.
protecting us the hill. And then, of course, the Chinese, when there was two battalions of men, of Chinese that come through that captured us, 48 guys.
They went right up to the outpost and captured you.
Yeah.
They kill quite a few doing that?
According to my citation that I issued, according to that citation, we killed on and about 1,500 Chinese
That were approaching that hill.
that were approaching that
night.
hill. What we done as our men done on the hill, and what artillery, and
How many did they kill of you, of the Americans?
according to the citation, there was 27 killed of our 48 men,
The rest of them were captured then.
and 16 of them were wounded,
Oh.
and then 8 were captured.
Now, the days were pretty long up there that time, weren't they? Or had the nights were they short?
Elmer, the 38th parallel is pretty much the same as North Dakota,
Oh, I see.
the time-wise and everything.
yeah.
So at 6 o'clock at night, at that time,
Getting dusk.
we're just getting dark,
Yeah.
you see, because of the
Yeah.
time. And the weather was cold,
Snow?
and some snow, wasn't that terrible much of it. And this was the 21st of November of 1951, which was the day before Thanksgiving. And we fought these, me and another fellow from Lamberton, Minnesota, were the last two boys to go down on the hill. I was the fortunate one because I got what they call a Bangalore torpedo. I was in a trench, and I reached up on the ledge of the trench to get a clip for my M1. I was shooting an M1 at that time. And this Bangalore torpedo came in over my head, and or not torpedo, a grenade, Bangalore grenade, which is a grenade is made of bamboo.
Oh.
In Chinese, these are bamboo grenades. That's what they're called. And that went off, so that knocked me out. And I wounded in the face and a bunch of. But then my buddy there, Bud Barker from Lamberton, Minnesota, was right in front of me, but he got one of our pineapple grenades, but it hit him in the rear, so it took part of his cheek of his butt off.
What's the difference in the pineapple grenade now? What's that like?
A pineapple grenade looks like a pineapple, Elmer,
Yeah.
and it's only you've seen them, and it's about this long. And when that explodes, it's millions of pieces of steel. A pineapple grenade is an American grenade, and that's made of steel.
Yeah.
So if I had gotten hit in the face with that pineapple, I wouldn't be here to talk about it. See, but and then of course, like I say, we run from one thing to another on that hill.
Were your buddy still able to run too and try and escape when that was hit?
No, well, I didn't know he was at that time. What had really had happened to him, because he was just about 6-7 feet from me when I got knocked out. See.
Oh yeah. Then you come to in a little while, did you?
Like next thing I knew, when I come to, the Chinese had me by the hands.
Oh.
And I'll get ahead of my story a little bit. Of course, these Chinese were coming in and jumping right into the trenches with us. And we were shooting them as they jumped into the. And I know myself, I had a couple fall right at my feet, you know. But this all happened within a couple minutes or so, you know. But when I come to, this Chinese was trying to get me, and then, so he had me by this hand and lead me, and then he had a pistol in this hand. No, he lead me by this hand, that's what it was. So I kept saying, Sweetie, Sweetie. That means water in Chinese, see? And I kept forcing him down the hill to where it was a little darker. And I seen I couldn't get him any further, so I flipped him and threw him on the ground. And he fell with the revolver underneath him like this, his pistol. So I reached under to get a hold of that revolver, and when I did that, he bit me. And you can still see the scar there today. See?
Oh, he bit you on the hand there?
Yeah, right there. See? And that's a scar from where he bit. And well, then I seen I couldn't get the pistol from him, so I was going to jump up and kick him in the face with my boots. And just when I got up, and then there was a couple more right behind me coming down the trail there.
Got more Chinese.
More Chinese, yeah. So then I surrendered. Well, then they went on to hit me across the face and the body with a pistol. And lo and behold, where they got that rope, I don't know. But they had about 10 feet of rope, and they tied that rope to my belt. and kept me ahead of them, about 6, 7 feet all as we were going back down the hill.
They walked behind you and you walked ahead then?
Yeah.
With that, you were tied to a rope then?
Tied
your
to that
belt.
rope, yeah.
Was it sort of a trail then, or a little rope?
Well, yeah, there was trails all over that hill
sure.
there. Because the Chinese had dug, and the Koreans or whatever, had dug trenches in all over the...
Now, were you surprised that these were Chinese rather than Koreans, or did you expect that?
We kind of knew that, we expected that because of, well, see what happened in the late 50s, you know, when the Chinese moved in, excuse me, they drove us Americans back, clean back to Seoul, you see.
That is the Chinese?
Or just, yeah, the Chinese did just about to Busan, really.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when MacArthur got things organized back and made the push, and when I got there, of course, we were within, I would say, 5, 6 miles of the 38th parallel line. So that we pretty well knew that they were Chinese all.
Yeah.
And then how long I walked that night, I can remember, but they put me in some dugout someplace along the line. And then the next morning, or towards daylight, then they took me, walked me back again another couple hours, and they put me in another dugout, and this is where I run into 2 of the guys that was on our hill, and Lieutenant Stone, they're the first lieutenant of the 3rd Platoon of Fox Company.
Was Lieutenant Stone, was he your commander?
He was the commander of the 3rd Platoon, yeah.
Yeah.
So then we had, instead of getting turkey for dinner the 22nd of November of '91, we got a bowl of rice and some snails. So that was our Thanksgiving dinner.
What are those snails cooked, or what are they?
Oh yeah, they're cooked. They're,
Mixed them in with the rice?
yeah, we mixed them in with the rice.
What about water? Did you get your water finally, or did they have water for you? And
Well, we drank. They had water there, but we drank it out of the rice paddies or
Yeah.
whatever had you know. But then they started walking as we come back, run into another group. They started marching us during the daylight hours, and
you know, these are Americans you're marching.
Yeah.
How many were there then in that group that marched?
I suppose in that group that I was in, there was probably 20 of us, probably somewhere in there. Can't exactly remember, but we got strafed once by our planes, our American planes. But when I heard them coming, I jumped for the ditch. We're off the edge of the road. And the pilot that was flying, he must have recognized that there was GIs, see, so he made another pass, and he come over us and tipped his wings, and
Did fire.
the flyer did.
Yeah.
That he recognized it was POWs, and then he went on. But he hadn't hit any of us. So. And I suppose then we walked about, well, all told, we walked about 150 miles
North.
north. And then out into a big old condo-like house out in the middle of the country. And they had us in there then for, I suppose, probably a couple weeks, 3 weeks, probably.
Were there more prisoners there than?
Yeah, there was more.
Yeah.
They were bringing them in there all the time.
And this was run by the Chinese?
Yeah, run by the Chinese.
What food did you get then each day from?
Well, mostly it was just rice and turnips and.
What kind of soup, or dry, or?
that was the kind of the rice was usually, it wasn't the pearl rice we get here, you know, today. It was kind of more of the raw rice, you know. And then they had beans, of course we call them soybeans. And green turnips, and that was our diet.
What about millet? Did you eat much millet?
No, they didn't. I didn't have any millet.
No. Yours was what you said was rice and turnips.
Yeah.
Cabbage? You have much cabbage?
Uh,
Did you get cabbage?
no, none of that.
They put any alfalfa in the soup?
No, they never put. Once we got into the main camp, where it was Camp 5, Puckdown, Korea, we talked the Chinese into letting the GIs do the cooking. Well, then the GIs done a better job of preparing
Sure.
because the Chinese and Koreans, like you say, it was just water and soup, you know, it was kind of a soupy thing. But then these would, GIs got to doing it, they made well, what we'd do, we'd get a little dish, a sauce dish about so big.
Were you issued a sauce dish or a spoon or anything? Or?
Yeah, that's all we had was that dish and a spoon. And
Kind of a round thing? Or
yeah, it's a round, it was, well, it'd be like our soup bowls today. you
small
know,
soup bowl.
Small soup bowl. And then we'd have one of them for beans and one of them for rice. And we used to make a joke out of it because, well, at breakfast we were going to have rice and soybeans today. In the evening we were going to have soybeans and rice. And what we'd do, we would put the rice, like in the morning we had rice and soybeans, so we'd put the rice in the bowl, put the beans on top. In the evening we'd put the rice in the bottom, or the soybeans in the bottom, put the rice on top.
I see. Well, pretty cagey.
Well, you had to do those kind of things, Elmer, and when you're...
Were you hungry all the time?
Well, at the start you were.
Yeah.
But as the time went on, it
Stomach shrunk, I suppose.
shrunk and you
Lost weight.
lost weight, and I was very fortunate. I caught the yellow jaundice about 2 weeks after I got captured. My fingernails and my urine just turned dark coke, you know. And I was sick, but I had enough, was able to fight it off and got by that way. So actually I was never really sick all the time.
Were there quite a few that died now in camp?
Yeah, there was, Elmer, there was a lot of, what happened, no man's body is the same, you know.
No.
And I was fortunate enough that I could stand that kind of a diet, that starchy diet, and which there was a lot of the boys that just couldn't do it.
Bodies wouldn't absorb, I suppose.
Wouldn't absorb it, see, and they died of malnutrition, really,
Yeah.
you know. And they were carried out to what we call Boot Hill. And I see by the paper I think it was last night or the night before, or the morning paper, that they're going to bring a lot of those remains back now.
Were the remains, when they died there, did you still have a dog tag? Or any marking? Did they give you any marking?
I don't remember. I don't think they even bothered taking the dog. They carried them, or in the summertime they took them by barge across the bay there and buried them at a foothill there, and just covered them with rocks and that type of thing. I don't think they even took the dog tags.
Did you have the dog tags on?
No, they took them away from me right off the go, so I never had any.
Did the Chinese or Koreans issue any kind of identification tag or card or anything?
Not whatsoever, no.
Did he give you a number?
No, they didn't. The only thing they ever give us was in the summertime you got one uniform and a pair of shorts, and the uniform was made of material like my white shirt here, you know, only it was blue. And then in the wintertime, they issued you a uniform with material similar to the shirt, only cotton in between it. See?
Oh.
So it was made like these old-time quilts that our mothers used to make years ago. And of course, you didn't dare wash it.
No.
If you washed it, all that cotton would roll up inside and you'd freeze to death.
Sort of a quilted.
Yeah. So by the time spring come around, you could stand it up in the corner and shake hands with your uniform before you went to bed at night.
Sure. How was it, cold at night?
It was
freeze?
it was the same kind of weather we got in North Dakota here.
What about heat in the barracks?
That was quite amusing, Elmer, the heat. They had these barracks, the squad I was in, we had 3 rooms, 4 people to each room, and we laid on the floor. Well, they had a big firebox on the end of the building, on the outside.
Firebox on the outside?
Yeah, and you'd build a fire. They'd start about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and build up a big fire and roar, and the flues run under the floor, and the chimney come out over here on the other end of the building, see. So these flues, they had about 3 flues.
For hot air?
For the air for drawing the chimney.
Yeah, that was a chimney more or less.
Yeah.
The smoke went through those flues
Right.
too.
And then that would heat the floor. It would heat the floor so hot that sometimes you couldn't even lay on it, couldn't even step on it. Well, then after it, they made us put the fire out at 5 o'clock at night, so you had 2 hours of
Heat.
to get this heat going. And then we'd go get the coals out of the firebox and put them in, we call them hibachis, and put them in a pail and kept them in the
In the room?
in the rooms. In each room had a
Pail with those coals.
those coals, and that kind of
What kind of, would you wear wood or coal for that fire?
wood.
Those were hot ashes then.
Hot ashes is what amounted to.
Got
Yes.
kind of smoky, didn't it, in the room?
Well, it never really bothered it. Of course, you got so used to
You
it.
got used to it.
Yeah. But that was our heat, of course. And,
Well, you got pretty cold by morning, didn't you?
oh, yeah. We got pretty cool some
Did
morning.
you have any blankets or anything?
Yeah, they issued us a blanket there. It was kind of a comforter type thing.
Was it a mattress or anything? Did you have a mattress?
No. We just,
Did you have a table in that room?
no.
Chairs?
Chairs, no.
You just how big a room was that you lived in there?
Oh, I would say it's about an 8 by 10
Just a plain room.
plain room. Just
What about the walls? Were they insulated in any way, or electric light or anything in the
the
ceiling?
walls were mud and straw.
Mud and straw.
I was kind of the squad leader in my platoon, or in my deal then. Of course, I always appointed some guy to get the beans and some guy to get the rice in the chow line in the mornings or in the afternoons. On this one guy, he would never get it, you know. He would always be the last one in the line. See? Well, we'd get the remains of the... So I was after this guy to get going, get that
Get in the line.
line. He called me a communist, and that was the worst word he could ever said, because I come right from the floor and he went right out the wall. The only thing, I knocked him right through the wall of the building.
I see.
He got up and went to the line after that. But then we had to go dig out some mud or some clay and
Patch the holes.
and get some straw hot, patch the room again. You know.
What about the bathroom or washing facilities?
Well, they had one
How many men now were there in this whole camp together, would you say?
in my camp. There was about 1,200 people.
1,200.
That included Filipinos and Hawaiian people and Turks and colored guys. They had us all segregated. See.
I see.
They had the Turks in one compound. They had the Americans and the Caucasian white people in one compound. The Filipinos and Hawaiians in another.
Did they have a fence between those compounds?
No.
Oh.
Just
You just knew that was your
Yeah.
area. Yeah. Then you had these, what do they
Then
call these
English.
barracks? What?
and then some Englishmen.
These buildings, do they call them blocks kind of, or what do they call, what do you call them, barracks or?
Well, they were actually just normally part of the Korean life there. You know, there were houses that
Yeah,
were
they
built
were
for the
houses.
Koreans.
Yeah.
Koreans.
How many were there in this house that you were in then altogether?
Well, in my squad there was 12 people, 12 of us.
In this house?
Yeah. There's 3 rooms and there's 4 people in each room. And
Now, did you play cards or anything like that?
oh yeah, we'd
Ever get any Red Cross parcels?
no, never.
Ever get anything special to eat?
Towards the end, the last couple of months before, we were very fortunate. We got 1 hog between 300 men.
Oh, one hog.
So we would have that night, we'd have pork and beans instead of beans. But you made a joke of that, you know. And,
What about cigarettes or tobacco?
yeah, the issue was around a raw tobacco, which was about that big around, I would say.
Stock of tobacco?
Yeah, a regular leaf tobacco,
How long? How about 2 or 3 inches in diameter?
something like that.
And how long?
Say about this long.
Each one get one?
Each one got.
Yeah.
And that had to last you a month.
Yeah. Did some smoke it and some chew it then, or some trade it
Some
off?
did it, some traded it, and then these Turks, you know, they were quite hustlers. Well, they shouldn't hustlers, but we'd go out on wood details, and they were the ones that knew what marijuana was.
Oh, I see.
And I'd never even heard of it before, but they'd go out there and they'd scrounge up this marijuana, you know. And then they would trade that marijuana to the guys for tobacco.
I see.
Yeah. Which I never smoked because I couldn't see myself going through health-wise, you know,
Yeah.
inhaling that stuff the way they did, watching them do it. You know,
Yeah. I noticed in several prison camps, that's one thing that they got from the enemy was tobacco. If
Yeah.
they didn't get anything else. A lot of them even didn't get food, but they got some tobacco for some reason or other.
yeah,
Say, what about money? Did they give you any money?
no.
Was there any records kept of you there in camp as to how long you were there or your name and so on? Did you ever see any record?
I never seen Elmer. So I don't know if they kept a record.
But I suppose the Chinese did.
I would presume because
Yeah.
my name was turned over in the prisoner of war.
Now, did you have an American that was in charge of this camp? Over you, between you and the Chinese?
No.
There was no intermediary. There was just
We had a Chinese general, or whatever you'd call him, a sergeant, I guess, of our platoon, with an interpreter. And that was the only guy that we'd meet with, you know, once in a while, or he'd come and talk to us.
Yeah.
But see, when we first got into that camp, they tried to preach communist to us.
Oh, I see. Well, they assemble you then and start talking?
Yeah, they assembled us, and then they put loudspeakers up in the camp poles, you know,
With the speakers on.
speaker on. See.
They spoke English?
Yeah, they'd speak English on that. But what we would do the night before, we'd crawl up there and cut the wire. Well, then next day, you know, they'd be talking, and we could hear them way off. So our platoon sergeant, whatever we called him, he'd become a simma. You're supposed to be, can't hear, you know. So then they got tired of fixing them wires up there, so they put all 4 speakers on one pole in the center of the camp center.
Oh, yeah.
And then put a guard on it. So then you couldn't cut the wires anymore. So.
Well, what were these propaganda speeches? How did they sound? What were they telling you?
Well, how bad the imperialist was, you know, and how bad the capitalist was, and the United States was nothing but a big capitalist country, and all this kind of
Just keep on repeating it.
repeating it.
What about, did they ever tell you anything about how the war was going, or?
No, they really didn't, you know. And of course, that's what kept us going too. Somebody had started a rumor in the camp, you know, oh, it was going to be over. Well, that'd give guys hope, you know.
Yeah. I suppose there was rumors every day in camp.
Oh, sure, I started some myself, you know, just to keep something to see how far it'd go, you know. And it was things that went on, like, well, they had us a job detail. They said they were going to build a recreation field for us. Well, we had to do it. So we had 2 rice sacks, a rice sack with 2 sticks in it, and we carried the dirt. We started out about 2 feet, and we went longer than a football field. And when we got to the end, it was over 20 feet high.
Well, you dumped all this dirt in a big pile?
We carried all that dirt from on that side of that football field, carried it out to the river, or the Yellow River, and dumped it in the river there.
How big was that river when you were there? Pretty good size?
Well, the main river, I never did really see it. It was the backup waters of the...
Oh, I see. Sort of an inland bay.
Yeah, see, we were... The camp where we was in was surrounded by water on 3 sides.
Oh. Now, what happened to this athletic field then, a recreation field?
Well, then we finally got it built, but you know how much you get a bunch of GIs together and they volunteer for nothing. They'd probably carry 2 spadefuls of dirt and 2 guys walk over to the river and dump it, you know. Oh, them Chinese would get mad, you know. And things like that went on. Like I said, it had to be a little humor to keep it going, you know.
Well, that's what kept you going, of course.
One morning I woke up and there was an Englishman. I heard this racket, you know, what's going on. And one of the guards was out in the middle of this parade field, this big field. And here was this Englishman standing out there on a pail with a stick about this long with a string on it. He was out there fishing. And well, that Chinese couldn't understand it. Couldn't try to get him out of there, you know. And the different things, like one guy, he was great for it. He'd have to go to the bathroom at night, you know. And he'd hear him start up his motorcycle, you know, rrr, you know. Pretty soon you'd hear another guy holler, "Hey, can I ride with you?" And away they'd go, you know. And that just drove those chinks right up a tree.
Yeah, I remember in camp I was at, there was a guy, now I don't know whether he's crazy or not, but anyway, when the guards come in to count, you know, a couple times a day, see, he had one of the little brooms, you know, the broom, old broom, and he'd run up in front of the general and he'd sweep. He'd sweep and sweep. Wherever the general walked, he swept in front of him, you know. He made a big show there for everyone. The general thought he was crazy. The Germans thought the guy was crazy. See? They didn't do anything to him. But every time they had parade, he went right out there to the general and started sweeping around him, you know, and cleaning up the area. The general General thought the guy was crazy. Did you have many guys go kind of crazy in there?
Well, we had some, you know, that
Yeah. We had some that just laid in bed all the time. I
Yeah.
couldn't get out or something.
we had most of them are pretty
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Did they all? Now, how long did you stay in this compound now that you're talking about, where you lived in this 4-room, 4 men to a room and so on?
I got back to that camp about the middle of December of 1951. And of course I was there and then till August 7th of 53.
Well, that got to be almost your home then, didn't it?
Yeah, we were there so long that you kind of wondered, is there such a place as the United States?
Yeah.
Am I dreaming about this, or is,
Yeah.
you just
Wonder if.
you're so long that you're into the same routine every day, you know.
Were you on many work details?
No, they didn't.
No. You just kept you confined. They guarded the perimeter all pretty well. I mean.
Yeah, and of course, like I said, on 3 sides there was water,
Yeah.
so they only had to guard the
Yeah.
south side.
Now, do you know if there was any homosexual activity that you know of in camps that you? I don't. I mean, I just say before that of all the men I've known and all the camps I've known, there was none of that activity, to my knowledge, that anyone ever mentioned. I'm just wondering if
No, not to my knowledge, neither. You know,
no.
I often wondered about that nowadays when you hear so much of that.
Yeah. Then it was not a question. I mean, I never even thought of it then.
No, I didn't either. But then, I never seen any of that.
I never heard of it either. So but I just thought I don't believe there was any. No.
I don't think so. No, but it could have been.
Yeah. Now, how could you tell that sort of the war was coming to an end, or that things were changing or something?
Well, the treatment got a little better. Like I said, they brought in the pork, and I kind of suspected that was maybe something to do with it, but we didn't know for sure, you know. And then that day that they called the whole company out on the parade field there, and the camp commander told us in Chinese that the war had been signed and be repatriated. So he figured that, they had cameras to go over there. They figured every GI would be jumping for joy, you know.
Yeah.
But everybody walked off the parade field just like it was another
day.
Day of the day. Nobody believed it.
No.
But getting back to July 3rd of 1953, I'll have to tell you this. Me and one other guy, they had built a big archway. I would say probably 200 feet long and about 20 feet high.
An arch.
An arch type deal, you know.
Out of what? Lumber or wood or?
Wood with evergreen spruce branches. And they built this, the Chinese built this for propaganda purposes.
Was that to show how nice the camp was, or?
Yeah, that was what that was all about.
Yeah.
So me and this other guy, on the 3rd of July, we crawled down there and we wound up a bunch of cigarette paper, you know. And one went in each side of this archway. And we lit the cigarette paper and then run like hell and got back into our barracks. Well, that was just like a blowtorch. That archway was dried spruce. Well, that thing went up and just, flat, you know. I never realized that there was that many chinks in that camp. And I jumped right into my bunk and in bed. I was snoring to beat hell when the the sergeant come along checking the flashlight.
Let's see.
Oh, we'd ever got caught at that way.
Did they ever kill any guys there that you saw them, execute them in?
Not that I saw, Elmer, not that I saw, no.
No.
Only killing I saw there was in the,
War.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then one evening, I was standing in the chow line, and out of a clear blue sky, the lightning struck, and there was 3 colored guys walking side by side across the end of this draw, like, you know.
Yeah.
And the lightning struck, and that come up that draw, and that one colored soldier had a GI spoon in his back pocket. And that, of course, he never knew it hit him. Lightning killed him right there.
Killed him, I see.
But I'll always remember that was a ball of fire about like this. And that went from here to the gentleman over there from my feet.
Gee.
So this, as it went up the draw.
And hit him.
And hit him, you
Say, did they physically punish you much, beat you in the camp?
Well, they tried. They tried different things. Of course, some of our blood brothers would turn us in, for benefit themselves, actually, is what happened. And they'd try to make me do the duck walk, They'd put your hands over your head and squat like a duck, and sit like that. Well,
Was that as punishment?
Yeah. And they'd have you up in the camp commander's office or the compound there. Well, I got so I'd stay up about a minute and then I'd fall over. Well, the only reason I fell over is to get circulation back in my legs. See?
Sure.
And then finally quit that too.
What would they give you that punishment for?
Well, something I'd said or done, there was mainly these, like we were talking back, them 6 turncoats that we had in our camps.
These were turncoats in your camp. You didn't know who they were now.
I could give you the names of all of them, but I won't.
No.
I won't repeat their names. But
But you knew who they were in camp?
I knew who they were. And
Did you have an idea that those men would stay in the camp after you were repatriated?
I actually didn't think they'd go that far, but
You were ready to turn them in when you got back to the States, I suppose.
oh, I did.
You turned them in. You knew.
I knew exactly who.
And you knew what they had done.
Yeah.
Were they given preferred treatment by the Chinese?
Sure they were.
Yeah.
Sure.
They were called in and given this and that.
Yeah. They were pretty shrewd at that. They'd probably take them up there, say, middle of the night, or
Yeah.
So the rest of us didn't see it, but
Yeah.
there's things that happened, that I was punished for. I'd supposed to said, but I knew the only way they could have found out about it was those turncoats.
Turncoats, yeah. Now, as far as you're concerned, there was just those 6 that you knew in that camp.
Yeah, that's the only ones of the 21.
That you know that knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now there were, what was it, 21 or so?
There was 21 in total.
Yeah. Say, you mentioned that lieutenant that was shot down, about that barrel. Could you tell that story?
Oh, about there was a captain of the Air Force. He was shot down, and how come they brought him into that camp? I just don't know, but they put him in this 6x6 hole in the ground, and they put an empty MiG tank, gas tank, on top of the hole, and I forget, I think there was at least 3 weeks, maybe a month, he was in that hole there. And the guard would sit all day long with the stick, pound on that tank, and what they were trying to do was to make him
Admit to something.
admit to germ warfare.
Oh, germ warfare.
Yeah. And which I don't think he ever did, because I never heard.
Well, I suppose
And all of a sudden they just took him out of there and took him away,
And you say they segregated the camp. The officers went to one camp
Right.
or area, and then the non-commissioned officers and the privates and corporals in another camp.
Privates and corporals were in our camp,
Yeah.
and sergeants, first sergeants, and officers went to one camp.
Did they promote any of you when you got back, or did they?
Well, yeah, I was promoted to corporal,
Yeah. Just one rank.
one rank, yeah.
They all were, I suppose.
I imagine the others were, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was a private first class when I went.
Yeah. Then, when you getting ready for repatriate, or you knew the war was coming to an end, could you tell us how that happened and what you started telling us there for a minute ago?
Oh, well, then they put us on this parade field, and of course, it told us that the war was over. But we actually didn't believe them. And we just kind of went back to our rooms and talked about it, and all of a sudden, my platoon leader come down, Chinese, and he come down with a pair of socks for me. You're going to be repatriated tomorrow, he said.
Give you a pair of socks?
Yeah. It was a pair of, cotton socks, you know. And I still really...
How come they repatriated you? Were you one of the first ones to be repatriated?
I was the first out of my squad to go, yeah.
You were.
How come that, I don't know. I was the first out of my squad, and of course there was many different in the camp, in the squads there. But then they took us down to the water the next morning and put us on barges, and then they loaded us on barges, and they took us, went about 10 hours, I would say, 8-10 hours, by barge down the river, or up the river, which river must have been done. And then they had trucks waiting for us.
Chinese or Korean trucks?
Chinese, yeah, Korean truck, or Chinese, I don't know which. Well, then they loaded it all in trucks.
How many were there then?
I think
quite a few, 50?
Yeah, there was about 75 of us, I think, somewhere in there. And then they loaded us trucks, and we drove the rest of the day by truck till we got to a train depot. And by that time, they had trucks coming in from all camps, you see.
Yeah.
And then they loaded us on a train then, with 50 men to a boxcar. So if you were laying down in the boxcar, you had to, if one turned, they all had to turn. The boxcars over there are quite small.
Were you getting some food by now and water?
We were getting water, and we still just getting our rice, you know. And that. Well, then they got to this camp then, and then we got Red Cross packages. That's the first I'd seen, and I pretty well believed then that we were going to get repatriated, you know, because the Red Cross was there. But and we stayed there about 3 days, and I was beginning to wonder what was taking.
Were you pretty close to the line then, to the?
Yeah, about
line?
about a half an hour from Panrajan.
Oh, I see.
And one morning they loaded us up in trucks and took us to the line. And
now, were those turncoats? They didn't get on the truck then? They left you at the camp?
They disappeared. No, I don't know where they went.
You didn't see them after you?
No, actually they went back to China or to where they went. I have no idea, because they were gone out of the camp. Yeah. And
now you knew who they were, though. That was common knowledge among the prisoners. Yeah. So you stayed there for
about
2-3 days, or?
Yeah, about 3 days, I believe it was, at that camp. And one morning my name was called, and we were loaded back up in trucks, and then we drove into the neutral zone, whatever they call it. And that's when I seen the MPs, and that was a great sight to see.
I suppose.
And we jumped out of those trucks and we were taken into a tent there in the building and discarded our uniform, discarded all our clothes, and took a shower, hot shower, and issued a uniform of a kind of a pajama type deal. And we were given a meal, and then from there we were loaded on helicopters and flown to Incheon.
Now, who were there American officers there that met you and so on? And
Oh yeah, there was a lot of dignitaries
everything,
there.
doctors, and the whole works. And yeah.
And
Now, how many were there in that? You say about 75 in your first group?
about that, yeah. Can't remember exactly, but and of course then it turned out they were coming every day, you see.
Yeah, sure. How many prisoners were there altogether? Do you have any idea? In the Korean War?
It roughly runs in my mind, Elmer, that there was about 12,000, 12 to 15,000 people that were repatriated.
And they repatriated maybe just about all of them except those turncoats. How many turncoats? What, 15 or so? Or
21 turncoats.
21 turncoats, yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them have come back later on.
Oh yeah, some of them. I think pretty much all the ones that I knew have come back.
Yeah.
Well, outside of one guy and as I understand it, he died of a heart attack. And
Now, they were court-martialed when they come back, weren't they?
as far as I know, they were.
Yeah. Yeah. Incidentally, when I was in Minot last weekend, and I maybe could ask you that now. I read in the paper there, that's from the Minot Daily News last week, 15th of June, 1996, Minot, North Dakota. The headline says, "Report U.S. POWs may still be alive in North Korea." Now, incidentally, the man that runs this program where they're looking for POWs in Russia, and Vietnam, and Korea, and so on, is a full admiral from North Dakota. I'm not sure whether
I see.
his name, I think his name was in here. Oh yeah, James Wold. I think he's in the Army, he'd be about a 3-star general.
Yeah.
He is the official man hired by the government to look for these ex-POWs. And I met him out at the air base here and talked to him, and I think he has a staff maybe of 1,000 people that are working, you know, like you mentioned, digging up those remains and so on in that place, and they're doing a lot of work. Now, they report these sightings, of course, of Americans, and there's a question of who they are. Because there are a lot of those POWs that they know they were captured, but they don't know whatever happened to them. I mean, no one's ever said they never got into the camps, or no one knows about them. Do you know whatever happened, or do you?
I don't.
You saw the little article.
Yeah, I read that article, yeah. But most of those that he's talking about there are deserters.
Yeah. Now, there's a difference. The turncoats, they were prisoners of war during the war, and they stayed there after the war.
Right.
Right. Now, the deserters, this was after the armistice had been signed, they were American soldiers who left the U.S. Army and went over to the North Koreans.
Right, yeah.
So they're called deserters, yeah. And it mentions those, and of course...
there could still be American prisoners over there, you know, I have no idea, but...
Do you know if there were... Now, North Korea, that bordered on the Yalu River, which was on Manchuria, China. Do you know if there are many POWs that were sent over into Manchuria or China that you knew of?
That, I didn't. I do know that the North Koreans didn't believe in taking prisoners. A lot of them. The guys told me that during the early part of the war.
Yeah.
So they were the ones that were captured, the Americans, were just shot, and that was it. You know, and that's got a lot to do with the people that they don't can't find, you know.
Yeah. Well, now, these Americans that were ex-prisoners of war, like yourself, that went into North Korea, were they taken care of or kept prisoners by the Chinese, basically?
Basically, yes.
Yeah. The
I
Koreans,
was-
what?
I was strictly the Chinese.
Yeah, you didn't have any contact with the Koreans.
No, that's what.
Do you know if any of the other prisoners, if they were with the Koreans or with the Chinese?
I don't. Seems to me Willard Soberg told me that he had some Koreans to start with.
Yeah.
But eventually he was under the Chinese. But
Incidentally, Willard Stolberg that he just mentioned, he's from Mayville. He was a prisoner
Yeah.
of war and captured in Korea there. Yeah.
yeah, I run into him in Camp 5, and it's him and I were the only two North Dakota guys, and that's how we got.
Yeah. I think this would be a good time to mention that that Floyd here, he won the Silver Star, and I think I don't have the citation here, but I'll read you a letter that was sent to was that to,
His mother and dad.
yeah, sent to your folks by his lieutenant. And his lieutenant received the, you say, the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Congressional Medal
Yeah.
of Honor. Yeah.
There's a thin line between the Congressional Medal of Honor and Silver Star. One is, if you win the Congressional Medal of Honor, you are given a stipend for the rest of your life. It's not a big stipend, but I think it started out at $10 a month about 200 years ago, and it's been going up. But the next highest decoration for combat is the Silver Star. And Floyd here won that. He's a genuine war hero. And you don't find too many of those guys. Most of the prisoners of war, they weren't heroes. They were just lucky that they got out of it. But I want to just take the liberty to, here's the little article that was in the Grand Forks Herald. It's dated August 9th, 1953. Is that 53? Yeah. And now there's a picture of Floyd here, and I'll just read you just this little thing here. It says, the first North Dakota prisoner of war reported to have been released by the Reds is Private First Class Floyd L. Stone, the son of Mr. and Mrs. Albert Stone of Calvin, North Dakota. He entered the Army in March of 1951, was sent overseas the following August, and November 2nd, the same year, was reported missing in action. It was later learned that he had been captured. This is an article and picture from the Grand Forks Herald. And when we're thinking of commendations and so on, this is rather interesting. Floyd Stone's lieutenant was a Lieutenant James Stone.
Right.
They had almost the same name. But this is a letter that Lieutenant Stone wrote to Floyd's mother and father, dated the 11th of September 1953. I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I'll just paraphrase a little bit of it. It's written to Mr. and Mrs. Stone, and I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about your son Floyd. There are no words which will give the praise for his heroic gallantry. As you know, Floyd is not of the type of men to tell of his bravery. And then he goes on to tell where he was during the war. And then throughout the night, early morning, the platoon of less than 50 men held off a numerically vastly superior enemy force. These are Chinese now, coming towards them. The platoon suffered 100% casualties during the action, that is, killed or wounded. The men fought desperately and inflicting staggering casualties upon the enemy. The platoon gave a magnificent account of itself in holding against 2 thrusts, or early in the evening, and 3 thrusts early in the morning. All the men defending the outpost were killed or wounded by an overwhelming Chinese mass. And it says Floyd's performance on duty that night was outstanding in many ways. And later Floyd was captured along with 600 men in the platoon, including myself. That's the lieutenant now that's writing this letter. The interesting or most unusual incident was that all of the men wanted to go down fighting. No one was going to give up or surrender. Floyd was one of the last men to go down. I came across him in a Chinese dugout behind their lines. Rather, he was led into the dugout that I was in. I was wounded in the neck, causing severe loss of blood. Floyd personally watched over me and helped me to live. And he gave me great help. I checked at Incheon and learned that he had passed through here when he was on his way home. You should be very proud of your son. His bravery and courage are found only in the best interests of men, It was an honor to serve with him. I'm doing my utmost to see that he and others are rewarded for their exemplary conduct under extreme combat fighting. There is no finer man than your son on earth today. Respectfully yours, Lieutenant James L. Stone. Pretty nice letter, you know, for a man to get who deserved it. I mean, you know, he did that. Now, getting away from the war for a minute. Now, when you got after the war, you went. Where did you go then? I mean, after you got on after you were repatriated with these men.
Oh, we were put on a ship. And we'd spent about a week in Incheon, and then we were put on a ship and brought back to the United States, which...
Yeah. What kind of ship did you come back on?
It was on a troop ship, yeah. And then we...
Come to San Francisco, or?
San Francisco, yeah. And it was quite amusing for me, you know, because they had an orientation on the ship. Now, if your name is called, you go to the right of the gangplank, rope of the gangplank. If it isn't, you go to the left. So my name was called, and I had no idea who was going to meet me there at this San Francisco thing. I didn't, it was in harvest time, so I didn't think the folks from Calvin could even, you know.
Yes, Calvin is a small town west of Langdon farming community.
Right, yeah. And so when I stepped off the boat and on the gangplank, come down the boat, there was a buddy of mine that was repatriated in April of that year.
From Korea?
Yeah, he was sick and wounded.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was standing there talking to Reuben, and this girl comes up and says, "Oh, there you are," she said. And she grabbed me and hugged me and gave me a hood, and I had no idea who she was. And here she was a reporter by the name of Helen McCurry for the Grand Forks Herald here in Grand Forks.
Yeah.
So which was quite surprising.
Yeah, she had come from Grand Forks then, or
I presume she did, or they you know.
Had a reporter, yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
Then we were taken and loaded on a plane and flew to Camp Carson, Colorado.
Camp Carson, yeah. You went from San Francisco. Where'd you go to? Hamilton Air Force Base, or Letterman first?
What was the name of that? Well,
it was Letterman Hospital there at San Francisco.
Yeah, we just spent a day there.
Oh, you maybe went right to the airfield there.
Yeah, I think that's what it's Hamilton. I think that's.
And they flew you on to Camp Carson.
Up to Camp Carson, Colorado.
Colorado, yeah.
And it was quite amazing. There was 5 of us, you know. And of course, we got into Colorado Springs, and there was a big sign in the airport there that says, "Call such and such a number, and the people come and get you." The Army base there. So the one sergeant, the first sergeant that was with us, he called, and told there was 5 of us there, and we had to go to. So they come and got us, you know. And the first sergeant and bus driver was mad, you know. This is getting on about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we never told them we were prisoners of war. Do we want to stop and have something to eat? No way. But we went right to the camp, you know, and they took us to the barracks CP there, and they issued us some blankets and a sheet and get to bed, you know that Army life is. So we went and got in our bunks, and next morning at 6 o'clock reveille, you know, we were all got up and got out there, and we were all standing in line, you know. Here we seen this motorcycle coming and this big limousine coming. The flags flying, you know, and here come the camp general. And I still see that first sergeant, you know, I never forget him. The general stopped, you know, and he said, "You got those POWs in this squad or in this platoon area?" Well, and of course this first sergeant, he was just dumbfounded, you know. And then our sergeant, that was out for us, stepped out and he said, "Yes, sir, we are 5 of us here." So then they loaded it in a big limousine and took her over to the officers' club and give us breakfast and then give us our papers and fix out our papers. And then from there was 3 of us going back to Denver to catch the plane. Well, we were going to catch a plane in Colorado Springs. But it happened to be a young fellow from Minneapolis, Minnesota, in this office there where we were getting our papers processed. He said, "Oh, you stick around for another half hour." He says, "I'll take you to Denver, the 3 of us." So we did, and he loaded up in his car, him and his wife, and which was only about 70 miles or so. Took us over to Denver. And, well, we got in the airport there, and we couldn't get a plane out, see, for Minneapolis. So the guy told us, he said, "Stick around, there might be a cancellation." So we did. We went down, put our stuff in the locker and went down cafe and had something to eat. And I suppose we'd been around there an hour or so. Well, in the meantime, this Laverne, St. Cloud, Minnesota, had called his parents, you know, and told them we couldn't get this plane out, see. So pretty soon there was a cancellation, and so we had to flip coins and who was going to go. Well, I won, so I got to go. And it wasn't 2 minutes later, here come the other 2 guys, you know, and they said, "We get to go too." So we get to find out what happened when Vernon had called his folks in St. Cloud. They had promised the St. Paul Press or the Minneapolis Tribune, I guess it was Minneapolis, the minute they heard from Vern, that they would call him. So they called the Minneapolis Tribune and told Vernon, just called him and he's in Denver, Colorado and can't get a plane out. The Tribune says, "We'll take care of that." And that's what happened. A couple of guys lost their ride. So we all 3 got to go to Minneapolis.
Check through Fort Snelling then, or?
No, when I stepped off the plane in Minneapolis, I heard my name hollered, you know, and I couldn't figure out. Well, my uncle and aunt that lived in Minneapolis happened to be watching the 10 o'clock news. And they heard I was coming in on the plane, see. So they were there at the depot or airport to meet me. And we still, you know, we never told the people in the plane that we were prisoners. You know, we never mentioned that. They couldn't figure out when we landed. And what's going on out here? All those people out here, you know. And then somebody'd holler, keep those soldiers back on that plane till the last. You know. Well, that's what took place anyway. So then I stayed with my uncle and aunt that night. Next morning, then I caught a bus out of Minneapolis for Langdon.
So that kind of ended the whole...
Well, I was met in Fargo by the reporters.
Yeah.
Whereas then I was met in Grand Forks by the TV and I couldn't figure out when we left Grand Forks, you know, there was only me and another lady from Hamilton, North Dakota. It was on the bus that night. And the bus driver was taking his time, see. So we pulled into Langdon, North Dakota. It so happened that the VFW club had had a dance that night. So what did they do? They brought the whole band from the dance hall down to the bus depot. And I was met there and here the TV girl that I just talked to in Grand Forks, radio, and they were all in Langdon and set up.
Oh.
So that ended my...
Well, that's a good story, Floyd. Thanks an awful lot.
You're quite welcome, Elmer. And
I realized then after that you went into the elevator business and different things and different jobs.
Yeah.
How's your health been since you got out?
Well, it's been pretty good, you know. I was pretty good up until about 85.
Yeah.
And then I started having problems. And in 89, I had taken my son down to a doctor in Rochester, Minnesota. And while I was walking around the Mayo Clinic down there, I had a heart attack.
Well, I'll be a son of a gun.
So the doctor told my wife that if I hadn't been where I was, I wouldn't have made it. You know.
Been feeling pretty good since then?
Yeah, I wound up having a quadruplet bypass plus a vascular surgery in my left leg. I had an aneurysm in my left leg. Outside of that, it's been pretty good.
Did you deal with the VA in Fargo?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They treat you pretty good?
Oh, yeah. Got no complaints there whatsoever.
Well, thanks an awful lot, Floyd. That's
Thank you,
real nice.
Elmer. And
Yeah.
glad to.
Yeah. Well, I know we'll get a copy of this for you.
Okay.
For your kids and so on. So,
it's not the pale moon that excites me, that thrills and delights me. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. It isn't your sweet conversation that brings this sensation. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. When you're in my arms and I feel you so close to me, all my wildest dreams come true. I need no soft lights to enchant me if you'll only